Hey everyone, welcome back to our beginner SwiftUI series. Today we're taking a look at design and interface. So last time we explore Xcode, views, structures, and properties, and today we're doing layout and style. If you haven't seen the first video, I'm going to link it somewhere up above there, or even perhaps in the description for you to check out. So these are the tutorials on the Develop in Swift developer website that was put out by Apple, but I figure, it might be a fun idea to kind of go through those together. Today, we're kind of going to practice putting views where we want them, expecting their size, and building 2 onboarding screens for a sample iOS app. As we kind of go through this example, always feel free to apply your own custom colors and designs, right? Makes sense to kind of follow along the coding steps. When it comes to colors and things like that, put your own twist on it, have a little bit of fun with it, right? If you want to make this project a little bit more meaningful to you. So let's go ahead and dive on in. So the first step it wants us to take is to create a new project. I've already opened up Xcode and pressed this create new project button. From here, we'll go to the iOS app selection and we'll hit next. All right, so for this one, make sure we're on SwiftUI, and we're going to be calling it onboarding flow. If you want to call it, tutorial number 2 or something more meaningful, feel free to do so. All right, we'll hit next, make sure our create Git repository on our Mac is not selected, and we can go ahead and create this new welcome page. All right, so instead of actually modifying our content view here, it wants us to create a new SwiftUI view for our project. So it wants us to go to the bottom left here where we have this plus. You can also right click in this kind of project navigator screen. It wants us to select a new file from templates. We're going to go ahead and do that right now. Mine's already automatically selected on SwiftUI view, but just in case you can't find it, iOS, user interface SwiftUI. You can also use the filter here, SwiftUI view. Either double click or hit next, and it wants us to call this welcome page. So we'll do that too, welcome page. Cool. All right, so instead of this hello world kind of basic example here, it wants us to try out different fonts, and by also changing this to say welcome to my app. So we'll do just that. We'll say welcome to my app. And then we can play around with different fonts. So after the text file, we can hit return to create a new blank line. Then we'll do the period or dot, and then we'll add font. Here it's already going to suggest that I do large title. We can also do the kind of tutorial suggests, it's font dot large title. I find it's easier to just do the dot large title. Both will work. You can play around with these things. Like if we wanted to have a caption, we can see how small that is. Even caption to even smaller apparently. Let's go ahead and leave it at large title though. We want this big, welcoming. But play around with the different fonts and things like that. So it's even giving us a call out here that we can use type inference because we know that this text is going to be a font. This kind of capital F font within the parentheses doesn't need to be there. We can use type inference if you want to learn more about type inference. I'll post another video above from my series. You can also press on this link to learn a little bit more, but essentially we can kind of use type inference for shortcuts. It's smart enough to know, we're referring to some font here. We don't need to, font dot something. It knows that we're accessing some text. All right, let's emphasize this next by using the font weight modifier. So we'll use font weight, and then within those parentheses, we can add what we want it to be. If you ever want to see what you can add within those parentheses, you can just add the dot notation and you can scroll through everything. So all of these M's are ones that we can really use. Okay, and we're going to select on the semi-bold so we can kind of see how that looks. Looks pretty cool if you want to play around with it, right? Change this to be just bold, just a little bit more thick. All right, next we're going to inspect the size of our views by using borders. So we can use the dot border, which is going to create an outline that the area of a view occupies. So we first need to wrap the existing body in a padded VStack by right-clicking and choosing Embed in VStack. So we'll go ahead and right click on this, embed in VStack, and now our text is wrapped within a vertical stack there. So again, just right click on the text, embed in, and then we're going to add another text here, which is going to say description text. So after our font weight, say description text, and then we'll set this font to be title 2. And then after the brace of the VStack, and again, if you ever want to find where that is, you can just double click on the braces to show all the code that's kind of encapsulated in there. After that, we're going to add some padding. We're just going to leave that argument empty. It also wants us to experiment if we have a lot of text, and we can use the multi-text alignment. So let's go ahead and check what that is. Goes here, ha ha ha, I love this app, right? Ramblings of a madman. If we were to do the dot multi-line text alignment, we can actually change how our text is aligned. If you've ever used any word editing software, like we have center, we also have leading and trailing. So if we center it, it kind of goes in the middle. If we do leading, it's going to kind of push things to the left, and trailing should push it more to the right. I really love the center. I think it looks really great. So now we're going to add those borders to the text views and specify a border width as well. So we're going to add borders to those text views, specifying a color and a border width. Just as a tip here, it says borders are great tools if you're having layout issues or if a view isn't behaving as you expect. Sometimes the actual boundaries of a view don't match the edges of its visible content. All right, so we're going to go back up. I'm going to make a little bit more space to our welcome to my app here. And under the font weight, we're going to add a dot border. And then we can add a color. So I'm going to do dot black. And we're going to use a comma to separate those different arguments for this. And we'll add a width. We'll add a number value. I'll do 1.5 like it suggests. And now we can see around the welcome to my app, I have this border around the text, and it kind of shows us all the area, or I guess like real estate, on our phone screen that it's taking. And now it wants us to actually add borders to the VStack before the padding to see the view with and without the padding. So we're going to do before and after, I see. Okay, so we're going to go down to our padding. We're going to go before it. We're going to do border. It wants us to do dot orange. Do the same thing with. If you want to copy your code from above, you totally can. And you know what? Might as well do that here. So we're going to do before and after the padding. This time we'll do purple. Cool. So now we can kind of get a better sense of the kind of area that everything takes. So we take a look at the black border here. That's just around the text. The orange is the kind of area that our VStack's taking up without the padding. And with the padding added, we can see that we get a little bit more space around all of our elements. And I know it's not in the tutorial, but if we were to increase this padding to say 50, we can see that we take up even more area with that padding now. So borders are a cool way to kind of, you might not want to include this in your final app, but it gives you a good sense of kind of the area of which all your elements are taking up. All right, set 5 wants us to complete the welcome page by adding a graphic using a shape and an SF symbol. So those are those built-in symbols. Start by adding a shape. Alrighty. So before the welcome to my app, and I'm just going to comment off these borders real quick with the double / just to kind of get rid of them. We can rename them later if we'd like. So right before the welcome to my app, we're going to make some space while still being within that brace. We're going to create a rounded rectangle. And within the parentheses, we're going to provide it with a corner radius with capital R, and then we can give it a number. Let's try out 30 like with the example. Oh my goodness, that is a huge rounded rectangle. So as it says in the note here, your shape stretches horizontally and vertically to fill all available space between shapes in SwiftUI don't have an ideal size. In turn, the enclosing VStack increases its size to contain the shape. So if we were to actually comment off those borders now, Kind of hard to see, but you can see how much our VStack actually has kind of stretched out. The corner radius is just kind of referring to the softness of the corners here. So if you were to set this to be 0, it'd be a very sharp rectangle, and 50, it'd be even more kind of rounded on the corners. All right, so to make our shape smaller, because this is taking up like most of our app here, we need to add a frame property. So after the rounded rectangle, we're going to do dot frame. And from here, we can give a width. Let's do 150 like it suggests, and we can also give it a height, which is another number. Let's do 150. So this should equate to be a square. Yeah, there we go. If we were to increase this, be 200 by 200 here, we can see that it does grow in size. So the larger the number, the more length or height that it will possess. All right, next we can use the accent color to change the shape's foreground style. So let's do that. So we'll do dot foreground style, and then we'll do dot hint. So something that I actually typically do is I'll do color dot, let's say purple or something, right? But again, because of that type annotation, because it knows we're going to be applying a color, you can simply just do tint to save a little bit of time. You'll get the same result in both. So type annotation is one of those tools where it's just like kind of like shorthand form. All right, next it wants us to use padding within stacks. So we don't just have to use padding outside of the VStack, we can actually use it within the VStack. So here it says the amount of space SwiftUI gives views, and the layout depends on their order, their types, their modifiers, and other factors such as dynamic type. In this case, the automatic spacing of the VStack puts the title close to the shape above it. You can use the dot padding modifier to give the title a little bit more space. So let's go to our title here, and let's go ahead and give it dot padding. We'll leave that empty. So we can see above and below the welcome to my app text, the shape has moved up and the description text has also in turn moved down. We can also adjust this number as well, and we can see things kind of fly a little bit further from one another. So next what we're actually going to do is we're going to restrict the padding to the top of the title. So instead of pushing both the shape and text, what if we only want to push the shape? Well, we can actually, instead of a number, put top. And you'll notice now the kind of text on the bottom, that descriptive text, moves back to where it originally was. You can also use a comma and a number to change the distance of the elements, right? So if you want to push something from the top 50 units up, you do top comma 50, and that's going to push all the top elements up by 50. Let's put it back to just top like in the example though. Next it wants us to use a Z-stack to embellish our graphic. So we can add a SF symbol on top of our shape by using a Z-stack. So Z-stacks are kind of like arranging views on top of one another. So you can think of like layers in Photoshop or Canva. Z-stacks allow us to put things on top or behind one another. So we're actually going to embed our shape within a Z-stack. So I'm going to right click on our rounded rectangle, embed in Z-stack here. So now we have this Z-stack kind of surrounding our rounded rectangle. So now after our foreground style, we'll make a little bit of space here, we'll add an image, and we're going to use this one from the system. So I'm going to press the plus button in the top right here. I'm going to click on this kind of star circle here to get all of our SF images. And let's go ahead and search for figure. I think it wants figure.2 and child holding hands. Where's that one? Okay, so it's the fourth one for me. Let's go ahead and drag and drop that on our line of code. We can see that it has indeed been added. And as we learned last time, we can actually use the font style for SF images to make them bigger. So we'll do font dot large title. Okay, that's added them a little bit more, but it's still not big enough. So step 4, it actually wants us to use a font size instead. So like, again, think back to your word processors where you can kind of choose the size from like, 0 to like hundreds, right? So we'll do dot system size, and this is where we can choose a number. It suggests 70. Ours is a little bit bigger because I think I made our shape bigger than the example. So I'm going to put mine to maybe 100. Yeah, that looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. Again, always feel free to kind of play around the sizes and things like that. All right, and now it wants us to change the color. So we'll do dot foreground style and we'll make it white. That looks pretty cool. That looks like the kind of example that was shown to us at the very beginning. Now, just to kind of reiterate how ZStacks works, I don't believe it kind of shows us within this tutorial. If we were to cut and paste this, you'll notice that our image doesn't show anymore. That is because it is layered on top of one another. So the first item you can kind of think of as the backmost item. And as we add things, we're putting them in front. So if I add something else, goes in front of that, goes in front of that, goes in front of that. So because our image is after the rounded rectangle, it's appearing in front of it. All right, and it wants us to now remove the borders. If you want to just comment them off, you totally can. If you want to delete them, it's totally up to you. I'm just going to leave them commented off because that is work we did before. But if you want cleaner code, go ahead and get rid of them. All right, this is our welcome page. I'm just going to change this back because the description text goes here. Haha, I love this app. Is a little bit unhinged. And I'm just going to change that back so it looks cleaner. All right, next it wants us to create the features page. So we want to build a second page to display the list of cards describing the app's features. To keep our views organized on the features page, we'll create 2 views, one for the page itself and another for the cards on the page. All right, so this is the image above here is what we're going to be creating. I'm excited. All right, so we're going to create a new SwiftUI view called features page. So we'll do the exact same thing. Again, just to show you, you can right click on this, new file from template, SwiftUI view. We're all pros at this already. Features page. So it wants us to create a VStack text features. Let's go ahead and just replace what we have here. So we'll say features, and we'll do dot font, and we'll set this to be title, and the font weight. We'll do dot semi bold. Let's go ahead and right click on our text, embed in VStack. Outside of our VStack here, some padding. And we don't need to define what that padding is for now. All right, then we're going to create our feature card. So once again, new file from template, SwiftUI view, feature card. We'll go ahead and create that. I'm going to add 2 properties, one for the icon and one for the description. So here I'm actually just going to kind of leave the hello world text for now. And under this structure, so if you remember from last tutorial, we're going to create those properties. So we'll say let icon name, and we're going to say that this has to be a string value. And we'll say let description, and we'll also say that that is going to be a string value. Something you might be noticing is that in your preview, it's going to say missing arguments. That's because when you're trying to preview something, and you're not declaring any, information, when you're trying to preview it, it's like, well, I should have a string name. It's like, well, I should have an icon name and a description. So you can press on this fix button here, where you can provide it with like the icon name. So if you want to reference an SF symbol, if you want to reference a description, right, you can pass it through this preview argument here. So you can kind of see how it looks. So in step 5, that's what it's talking about. We want to add those arguments. And we're also going to make sure the description is long enough to occupy 1 line of text. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy what it has here. Person.to.crop square.stack.fill. And then for our description, a multi-line description, a feature paired with an image. It wants us to test long text. Cool. So now we remove that error because now when we go to preview it, where we're going to be displaying that information, it now kind of has like a fallback or a default that it can use while previewing the app. Because we're not using them, we don't see those changes live, but we potentially might in the future. All right, step 6, in the view's body, display the SF image by using an image inside the H stack. Use the icon name property as the icon. Cool, so above our text here, let's make a little bit of space and we'll add an image. So we'll type out image, we'll say system name, and then instead of referencing, like an image, like the, weather cloud or something, we're just going to say icon name. So this icon name that we created up here. And now you'll actually see in our preview, it's a little small, so let's actually make it a little bit bigger. So we'll do dot font, dot large title. It's actually going to use that preview image that we provided here. All right, and I believe it wanted us to wrap this in an H stack. So right click on image, embed in H stack. Next, it wants us to add a text view to the H stack in order to add a description. All right, so after the font here, we'll add some text, and within the arguments, we'll say description. And we can see that whatever we put through in our preview does appear there. And it wants us to add a colored background using a rounded rectangle. All right, so after the H stack, we'll do dot background. Within these arguments, we're going to say dot tint, comma, in. We're going to use a colon, rounded rectangle. We'll add another set of brackets here, and we're going to add in that corner radius, and we'll give it a number. It suggests 12. And now we can kind of see we have this blue wrapping around our multi-line text. Let's go ahead and get rid of this text hello world, by the way. We definitely don't need that. And we can give a foreground style here, dot white. Sorry, let me scroll up on my screen here so you can also see. So step 9, we're applying a white foreground style to improve the contrast of the card. So we're putting that foreground style to be white so it kind of pops off of that blue background. All right, and I was going to suggest this, so I'm glad that the tutorial does. We're going to now give the card's content some space by adding a padding modifier to the H stack before the background modifier. So right after this brace, dot padding. Perfect, now it doesn't feel so cluttered. All right, next we're going to use the navigator to switch to the feature page file. So we're going to go over here, feature page, and then we're going to add a feature card below our title. So under the features here, we're going to reference the feature card. So still within this VStack, we'll make a little bit of space, and we're going to say feature card. We're going to add our parentheses here, and the autofill is already going to suggest what we need. We want to reference the icon name and description. So we're going to do the same thing that we did from our preview here. So if you want to actually just copy and paste this, you can save yourself some time. If you want to kind of put in your own, feel free to do so. So I'm just going to copy and paste. There we go. It also wants us to add a little bit of padding. So we'll do dot padding. And this time, because we just want to separate the content below the features title, we can do dot bottom as opposed to doing top like we did last time. All right, now it wants us to add a second feature card with a different icon and shorter description. Alrighty, so after this first feature card, create some space, and we can reference it once again. Feature card, we'll add our brackets there. It wants us to use quote bubble dot fill. So let's see, quote dot bubble dot fill string short summary. If you wanted to add your own images, again, you can go here and you can kind of reference them, right? So if you want to do like a pencil, Apple pencil, right? You can just instead say Apple pencil. So now for step 14, we notice that the card with the shorter description doesn't fill the whole width of the screen. If we switch files, we can fix the card view. We actually won't see the second card that's been added. So if we click back on our feature card, we only see this one because in our preview, that's all we've decided to show. So what we can actually do is we can click the pin preview button in the top corner so we can see both cards while we edit from another file. So we go back to our feature page and we press pin. So you'll see that this is now kind of lit up. We can go to our features card and we can actually tab between these two. It's kind of been pinned, and as we make those changes, we'll retroactively see those live. So this is really great. If your app contains a lot of views, you can pin a few key previews to minimize switching back and forth. It'll save a lot of time and headaches. So step 15, we're going to select the feature card in the navigator and then add a spacer to the end of the stack. So after our description here, we're going to go ahead and type out spacer, and we're going to choose the one with the parentheses. So what a spacer does is basically it expands as much as possible to fill an empty space in the direction of their containing stack. So because we wrap this in an H stack, you can think of horizontally, it's going to fill up as much space as possible horizontally. If we were to do this in a V stack, it would fill as much space up and down. All right, so step 16, now that both cards are full width, make icons occupy the same width by adding .frame and padding to the images. All right, so here we have our image name with the icon name. Under the font, we'll add a frame. So .frame, we'll say width, set this to be 50. You would also select the height if you'd like. I'm just gonna leave mine with the width, and we'll add some padding. And this time we'll do .trailing, comma 10. All right, we've apparently moved all the way down to section 7, which is going to combine screens with tab view. So to create an onboarding experience where people can swipe between the pages, use a tab view. Like other container views, tab view contains multiple child views, but a tab view does display them all at once. It shows one view at a time and gives people a way to switch between them. So like think of like your clock app on your iPhone, right? You can kind of press those different ones at the bottom and tab between those. So in iOS apps, a default tab view displays tabs at the bottom of your screen. You tap on a tab to display the corresponding view. In this example, we're going to modify that behavior with a tab view style to instead swipe between the two pages. All right, let's go ahead and select our content view in the navigator. And we're actually going to unpin. So we can press on this pin button here, the preview for the features page. So we're going to replace the body code. So here we have like our VStack and all that. We're actually going to replace all of this. And we're going to now put in tab view. We're then going to add a brace here. We'll say welcome page. And then we'll include our features page. And after the brace, so if you want to just double click to make sure you're on the correct one, but it should be that brace on the bottom there, we're going to do .tab view style. And we can press the period here. We have automatic, page, sidebar adaptable, and we're going to do the page style. So this .page style allows us to swipe left and right to change the views. To see the tab view in action, we can apparently click and drag in the preview, which we totally can, and we can actually go back and forth between these two. You can see because we have nothing more to the left, it kind of bounces us back. Same if we go too far that way. All right, next we're going to define some colors in the asset catalog. Ooh, that looks pretty cool. Something you also can't see is when you have multiple pages, you kind of have these, you might be able to, let me scroll up on my end here. You kind of have these white dots to kind of signify to the user that there are additional pages. So what we're going to do is we're going to define colors in the asset catalog to make a background so we can actually see those indicators. So we're going to go ahead and go to our assets catalog. This should come in all of your Xcode projects. So for me, it's actually the first one. It kind of looks like a couple photos next to each other. When we click on it, this is where we can add different images and different colors to our application. So I'm just going to expand this here. So we have accent color and an app icon. Looks great. And when we select one, the details are going to appear in the panel to the right. If we want to add our own colors, we can press on the plus button here at the bottom. You can also right click, new color set. So if we press on the plus, color set, this is where we can give a name to our color. It wants us to call this one gradient top. Gradient top. Use camel case here. and we'll want to make sure that our inspector is open. So currently mine is hidden. So the very top right of Xcode, you can see this hide or show the inspector. We're going to go ahead and show it. I apologize if this is a little bit cluttered right now. And in the inspector next to appearances, we're going to click on this. So here's appearances, and we're going to select the same color for light and dark mode. So we're actually going to have this be on none. So this is going to be a universal color, regardless if the user is using light mode or dark mode. If we actually go back here, there's any light dark. So you have any appearance, light mode, and dark mode. But we're just going to go ahead and have the none option, so it's universal. All right, we're going to then click on the color kind of in the middle here, and we can use the inspector on the right side to change your color. So there's this kind of color tab here, and you can use the color pane, you can do the RGB values, so you can play around with whatever colors you want. I'm going to copy the ones in the description here. So it looks like they're using display P3 under the content, and under the input method they have, I believe, floating point. Yeah. So I'm going to do 0.852. For green, it's 0.646. And then our blue value is 0.847. All right, so that is our gradient top, and we're going to do the exact same steps to create a gradient bottom. And I'm going to steal those colors there too. So right click, new color set, appearances, none. We'll click on the color here. Go ahead and add those numbers. 0.954, 0.529, and 0.385. Cool. You can change how the content is. So if you like RGB, if you want it to be that kind of 0 to 255 kind of number range, you can use those, of course, as well. They're just using this floating point, so I'm just copying that. There's also the color panel, and you can use things like the color wheel, the RGB sliders, right? If you have any colored pencils or things like that. So you could choose the color from this as well. All right, oh, I forgot to give it a name. You can kind of click, wait, and then click to rename, just like you would with files on your Mac. Gradient. There we go. Cool, so now we need to open up our content view file and declare a global property for the gradient colors to work at the top level above the declaration of the content view struct. I'm also going to hide my inspector here to reclaim some real estate. So under the importing of our SwiftUI, we're going to go ahead and create a let constant, and we'll say gradient colors. We're going to add a colon, and then we're going to create these square brackets and say color. Outside of those square brackets, we're going to say equals, add another square brackets, and we're going to do a gradient top, comma to separate the two, dot gradient bottom. So gradient top, comma, gradient bottom, both those do have a dot in front of them. So we're going to add a background to the tab view. So under our tab view, so right above the tab view style, we'll do dot background. We're going to reference our gradient with a capital G. We're going to add another bracket here, and we're going to add the colors. And from here, we're going to reference our gradient colors. Cool, so we background, bracket gradient, another bracket, colors, colon, gradient colors, which is what we declared on line 10 here. And now we can see our app. That looks pretty cool. And we can see those two little circles I was talking about. So if we drag it over, we can see how it kind of automatically updates those two things. All right, section 9 wants us to improve our app design. So we want to choose an app accent color that fits the color scheme of our app, then modify the text and backgrounds of our views to enhance the style. Okay, so in our content view, apply a white foreground style to the tab view to change the colors in both views. So when we apply the foreground style to a view, the color will cascade down to all subviews that don't set their own foreground style. All right, so let's go ahead and add that now. Foreground style dot white. So we can see how that changes the text color, right? Without this, it's black. When we add the foreground style white, it updates it all to white. So now we're going to go to our assets catalog, and by default we have something called accent color, and this is going to kind of change the accent found within our app. So we're going to go ahead and open up that kind of inspector again. We're going to make sure that we are on universal. So we're going to select it here where it's got universal. So we're going to select this tab here. And we can actually change the color. So under content, we'll change this to be display P3. We can copy the numbers from that again if we want, but of course, always do your own colors if you want. So 0.269, then we have 0.337, 0.647. Okay, so that should match the ones in the project. So in order to see the new accent color in our app, we're going to select the content view and look at the graphic for the feature cards. Oh yeah, and we can see that looks exactly like the screenshot here. Amazing. So step 5 is to select the features page file and add our background color to the preview so we can see how our accent color will look with the finished app. So features page. And we're going to actually go to our preview. After where it says feature page, we're going to add a property to it. So dot background. We'll do the exact same thing. Gradient. Add another bracket. Colors. Gradient colors. See here that the white foreground style also is cascading to the features page, which is on right now from the content view, but it's not affecting the title text within the preview. To fix this, we need to add a white foreground style to the preview. So down here, dot foreground style, and we do dot white. And now we can see that that features here has indeed turned white. So the features page preview doesn't also extend to the full height of the device. You can see that we're kind of stuck in this little box because the VStack tightly hugs its contents. We can extend the preview vertically by requesting infinite height. So as opposed to the frame with height alignment, we can use this variant of the modifier to specify a flexible frame, and we can skip the arguments we don't need. Here we only need to provide the max height parameter. See, we see that goes from left to right here, but it's not going from top to bottom. So what we're going to do is before the background, we'll do dot frame, we'll do max height, colon dot infinity, and that's going to stretch it all the way as far as it can go from top to bottom. Now that looks much better. All right, and we can also add some custom spacing within a VStack. So instead of, spacing after each and every item, we can actually specify how those items are spaced within the VStack itself. So after the VStack, we can add an argument with our brackets here, and we can say spacing, colon, space, and then we can add the number. So if we change this to 30, if we change it to 50, and now we're going to use a spacer to push the contents to the top of the screen. So after the feature card with our Apple Pencil or quote, that second smaller one, we'll add a spacer, and this should push everything all the way to the top. To keep contents away from the very top of the screen, we need to add some padding to the title, and we'll do that through the top. So if we go here, dot padding, dot top, 100. Now it's going to add some space from the top, so it's not like at the very top most of the iPhone. All right, so we're going to go ahead and now pin the feature page so we can preview it while we make edits. And we're going to open up our feature card here. Then we're going to open up our feature card on the left side, and we're going to change the background modifier to use a custom view. So within this variant of .background, we can use an arbitrary view. In the following steps, we're going to use that flexibility to alter the rounded rectangle's color. So down here, where after our H stack, we have the padding, we have our background. We're going to go ahead and delete this code here. And we're going to do .background once again. But instead of our kind of brackets, we're going to add a brace, and we'll hit return to make some space. And we'll do rounded rectangle. And within these parentheses, within these brackets, we're going to add a corner radius, set that to be 12. So I added that for me. And then from here, we're going to add the .foreground style .tint. All right, now we're going to reduce the opacity of the card background. So under the foreground style tint, we'll do .opacity, and we'll put a number in here. It has to be a double from 0 all the way to 1. 1.0 is going to be like full. Anything less is going to be a little bit more transparent. So if we do 0.25, we see how that kind of fades out. If we did 50, you know, it's a little bit easier to see. Let's leave it at 0.25 though. Now for our final touch, we're going to bring back the contrast by reducing the brightness of the card background. So brightness ranges from -1 to 1. Negative values blend black into the view, and positive values blend white into the view. So we can try both positive and negative. So after the opacity, we're going to do .brightness, and let's do -0.4. Cool, so that adds a little bit more black. If we were to do just positive 0.4, it brings in more white. I actually don't mind what they have in that example there. I think that looks pretty cool. All right, apparently that's it. So we can test our learning. What's a good technique for inspecting the size of a view? We were using that border earlier to kind of see the real estate that it was taking up. So I'm going to go ahead and say border. Yep, a border draws a line around a rectangle. The view occupies. In which direction do spacers expand to push other content? In the direction of their containing stack, or perpendicular to the direction of their containing stack? So I believe it was in the direction. That's correct. A spacer helps you separate elements in a stack by pushing them away. And finally, how can you create a frame with infinite height? We have a few things. We're going to use the .frame modifier with the max height argument of .infinity. That should be right. Cool. So next, hey, we got all the questions. Good for us. We can wrap up layout and style. There's an article that we can read. We can reflect on the concepts. But essentially, for the skills that we've covered, we reduced code by using type interface. So in the example of having our fonts, right, for this line, instead of .font, and then within the arguments font.large title, .font.large title, that works. I showed you the example with the color as well. Debugging layout issues using those borders so we can kind of see where it's occupying, adjusting the size of the elements using frames, using the 3 different types of stacks, controlling the placement of content in a stack with spacers, so pushing things up, down, left, right, navigating between views using a paged tab view, and custom colors set in the asset catalog. All right, if you'd like to continue practicing with this tutorial, there is an extend your app and a challenge yourself here in the tutorial, which I would definitely check out if you kind of want to learn a little bit more. But this is pretty cool how we've created this, you know, kind of app here. Let's go ahead and unpin this so we see our content view with all these different customizations. It's pretty clean. So next time we're going to go ahead and dive on into updating the UI with state. So we're going to see how we can actually use the state properties to, you know, track changes, which is pretty fun. We're apparently going to virtually roll some dice. Sounds like a lot of fun. Well, that's everything. Thank you so much for watching. If you like the content, you know, like, comment, subscribe, you know, ring the bell, all that fun stuff. And otherwise, have an amazing day and dream big and code bigger. Bye.